Protests have gripped the country of Colombia for more than a week, and dozens have been killed after the government proposed regressive taxation and other unpopular economic reforms that would have led to increased taxes on items that would severely impact the country's poor. It's important to understand the inequality in Colombia. It happens to be the second most unequal Latin American country, so you can understand why there would be an uprising as a result to this proposed regressive taxation. But there's more to it than that when you scratch the surface. First, there's President Ivan Duque, who announced his tax reform, one of the first attempts in the region to try to deal with the economic shortfall exacerbated by the pandemic. While the measure would have kept in place a critical pandemic-era cash subsidy, it would have also raised prices on many everyday goods and services. And again, when you're already dealing with severe inequality in the country, additional regressive taxation in the form of a VAT tax, which is essentially a sales tax that would impact things like milk, for instance, is just untenable. The region's economies shrank an average of 7% in many places. Unemployment, particularly among the young, has spiked. And as Myra Lemus, a school teacher who's been protesting, has said, this is not just about tax reform. This is about corruption, inequality, and poverty. And all of us young people are tired of it. Colombia has had a long history of struggles between farmers. There are supposed to be land reforms that the conservative President Duque has not actually carried out. We can get to those details in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at this video that helps you see just how terrible the situation is on the ground.
Colombia has been devastated by COVID-19, a soaring death rate that's almost reached 3,000 in the past week, and an economy buckling under the strain of lockdowns. The working poor, especially hard hit. And now this anger, sparked by a government plan to raise taxes on many everyday items, part of a bid to rebuild the economy post-COVID. But after days of protests, the move was shelved by President Ivan Duque.
So Ivan Duque has pretty much been a disaster, and his popularity, whatever popularity he had, has taken a shot clearly during the coronavirus pandemic and his handling of it, because of the fact that there was an uprising after these proposed economic reforms. He did decide to retract that proposal, but by the time that he had done so, the militarized police force and how brutal they were toward the demonstrators essentially persuaded the demonstrators to continue protesting, continue demonstrating on the streets, and the situation has not in any way calmed down. I'll give you more details on the history of the militarized police force in Colombia in just a moment, but Cenk, jump in.
Yeah, so Defense Minister Diego Molano, of course, blamed left-wing radicals and said that they were driving the violence here. Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, which actually did a peace deal with the Colombian government back in 2016, and the National Liberation Army, ELN. And why did they do that? Because that's what every right-wing government does every time. If right-wingers protest, well, they're patriots, and there's something wrong in their country, and they're trying to fix it by usually overthrowing a government that's helping the people, and instead bringing giant American corporations in, because that is what really helps the people of Colombia, or fill in the blank in Latin America, Africa, etc. Right? And so, but I'm just tired of every right-wing government, including ours here in America, constantly saying, oh, if it's left-wingers that are protesting in the streets, and look at them. Those are all FARC, those are all left-wing militia, and I'm sure at some point they were called terrorists, right? And by the way, just
FARC has been disbanded as a result of that peace deal that was made in 2016. But here's the thing. Duque has not followed through on what that peace deal entailed, which, by the way, FARC was mostly made up of farmers who were tired of the inequality and the fact that there was a land grab. And so part of that peace deal was meant to redistribute that land to the farmers, and he just hasn't done it. right? And so to blame this on FARC is ridiculous, especially because, I mean, it's a similar trend that you're seeing in other Latin American countries. This actually reminds me a little bit of the uprisings that took place in France fairly recently, a few years ago, with the yellow vest, because it's not just the proposed regressive taxation that tends to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's the ongoing inequality, it's the ongoing corruption, and people are sick of it, so they're taking to the streets.
So there's polling in America that shows about 2/3 of Americans say that they are in favor of increasing taxes on the rich. When anyone who's a legislator proposes that, the right wing in this country, and usually helped by the press, calls them radicals, left-wing radicals. Well, that means 2/3 of America are left-wing radicals. Good news, right? So same thing I see in Colombia there. Really, that's all FARC and ELN? Well, number one, you know that's nuts. Number two, oh my God, then FARC and ELN should take over the country because they're gigantic, right? Most of the people apparently in the streets. No, of course it's not true. It's demagoguing against your opponents.
Yeah.
Why are they actually upset? Because you propose taxes, but taxes that go mainly to the average person who could barely afford them. But guess what? As always, the people in power just couldn't find a way to tax the wealthiest people in the country. They just, oh golly gee, we looked and looked, and it turns out all the rich people are out of money. But you folks out there that have no money and are going to get killed by this incremental tax, we think you do have the money, so we're going to take it from you instead of the people who put us in power, who we support. So it's right wingers don't care about democracy. All they care about is protecting the rich and the powerful.
And Colombia has a history of murdering left-wing presidential candidates. That's another thing to keep in mind. So to make it appear as though the left is agitating in Colombia and that they're the bad guys is ridiculous. Now, putting that aside, we do need to talk about the militarized police force and why it's as powerful as it is, how it's responded to these protesters. As I mentioned earlier, they've used excessive force, incredible amounts of brutality. The clashes have left at least 24 people dead, most of them demonstrators, and also at least 87 people are missing. And so with that said, we're gonna show you the next video that demonstrates, or at least illustrates, what that brutality looks like. It's a little graphic, but I think it's important for people to know just how bad the situation has gotten. Watch.
Security forces' response to the demonstrations, including military helicopters seen shooting at protesters below, has only intensified anger in the streets. At least 24 people have been killed, including a 17-year-old who kicked a police officer on a motorbike, then got shot.
So as I mentioned, it was stated in the video as well, 24 people are dead already. Dozens of others are missing. And if you want to know how it is that the police force is so militarized in that country, it's because the United States, in its efforts to engage in the nonsensical drug war, decided to arm the law enforcement in the country. That's part of the reason why they have the weaponry that they have. That's part of the reason why they're as militarized as they are. And it was all for, again, a failed nonsensical drug war.
Yeah, but as I saw the footage and as I read the descriptions of what happened about the militarized police in this scary Latin American country and what they're doing to their own citizens, some of whom are unarmed, I thought, what are you talking about? That sounds exactly like the United States of America.
Yep.
I remember just a couple of months ago, there was tanks rolling down the streets of LA because black people were protesting, so they flipped out. And all of our cops now look like stormtroopers. God forbid you should do a left-wing protest, they'll come out in full regalia that's totally militarized. They'll come out in near tanks, sometimes actual tanks. And then do our cops shoot unarmed protesters? All the time. So we say it as if oh, this poor Latin American country. No, they learned it from us. And in that case, quite literally, we trained back in the day, we trained their police on how to murder people that they were opposed to. And so now they're doing it to the citizens, just like here in America. So look, Catherine Franz wrote in on YouTube Super Chat. Thank you for doing a story about Colombia. I used to live there and my friends there are really gonna wanna see this. I appreciate you saying that, Catherine, and you send it to them. And I've seen this now in so many different countries. And I remember this one Kurdish reporter came up to me a couple of years ago. They said we couldn't believe it that there was an actual American news show presenting things honestly. Because so much of our media normally, historically, then goes, well, the right wing, of course, represents the actual people of that country, and the left wing are agitators. Agitators, they should know their role and pay the tax and make sure the rich don't get taxed. Don't listen to them. They're lying to you. The people in charge usually want to help the people in charge. And look at what happened. You held him accountable and he withdrew the bill. If there were no protests, he would have just rammed that bill through. The rich would have paid nothing and they would have put all the expenses on you guys. Keep on protesting and do it vigorously. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.